We're just some crazy people that decided to do the Mongol Rally on bikes because it sounded awesome. Obviously, we climb. We both work in climbing centres, so that's where the name came from.
I've now been riding for about 16 years. So I've done quite a few trips in my time. I think I've had 14 different bikes. Every year or so I'd go through like a fever where I'd want a new bike and just switch it out. Started off on sports bikes, then watched The Long Way Round, which I'm sure a lot of people did, got quite inspired by that, and immediately went out and bought a BMW, slightly smaller one, not the big one, and then since then I've just been doing longer and longer trips, starting off by going out to the Isle of Man, going around Europe a few times, various things, Alaska, and then now we decided to do the Mongol Rally.
I've not been riding very long. I think I got my CBT a year and a half ago. Decided to do the Mongol Rally while I still had a CBT and didn't have an actual license. Asked Sinnis for the bikes before I got my license, didn't tell them. And finally managed to get my license about 2 months before we set off. Only had 2 bikes. First one was a YBR and the second one was the Sinnis. I was keeping my YBR until after the trip in case this one broke, and then I'd decide which one to sell when I got back. But yeah, the YBR is being sold, trying to sell it now, so if anyone wants one, please buy it off me. And I'm keeping the Sinnis.
Good question. It's something I found several years ago. It's probably about 3-4 years ago now. It was something I always wanted to do. I was working in a different job at the time, which didn't allow that sort of time off. So it was something I looked at and went, yeah, that'd be really fun to do, but I can't really do it right now. And then just sort of left it in the back of my mind. Me and Holly have been together now for nearly 2 years. I mentioned the idea to her at the back end of last year, showed her everything. And then she decided in December, January, literally just to sign up, which kind of went, oh, we are doing it.
Yes, so I was doing some Googling on the Mongol Rally in general, and just particularly bikers, found out that another guy had done it in the past on an Apache, which was another Sinnis bike. So I thought Sinnis would be a good company to contact to see if they would sponsor us with some bikes. Sent a very nice email. We got very, very lucky. They said yes, they would happily sponsor us some bikes, and they wouldn't even be second-hand ones. They'd be nice new ones. So we got 2 shiny new Sinnis Terrains.
Good question.
Lots of fundraising mostly. So part of the Mongol Rally is raising as much money as you can for charity. So we had 2 charities, Climbs Against Cancer, which is this one here. So what they do is they give money to different cancer research groups around the world who they think are doing the best work, and also Cool Earth, who is looking after rainforests. So we split our money equally between them. Most of our time was spent preparing doing that. Apart from that, I played probably visas.
Yeah, that was a tough one because we went into, I think we calculated it was 23 countries altogether. Like half of those were the European ones, which wasn't a problem, but then you had the more technical, difficult ones like Russia, which actually took 5 weeks to sort a visa out for, Mongolia, which is still handwritten, and then just working our way through the processes. So it was a lot of red tape, bureaucracy stuff, but there's lots of companies out there that can help you with that, and if you're just methodical, then yeah, visas actually aren't that too much of a problem. Other than that, it was just trying to work out what we wanted to take, what was essential, what was a luxury, and whether it would actually fit on the bikes, which I think we ended up repacking 3 times before we actually went.
Not too bad.
No, in the grand scheme of things. We haven't done the maths on how much per day.
Altogether, what was it, 4,500?
About £4,500.
But that was including the tow truck fee through Russia when we were in the van that broke down on the way back.
$800.
That's hard.
800, yes, 800.
$1,000.
$1,000, was it?
It was £800, $1,000.
Oh, yeah, $800. Yeah.
Apart from that, the main costs were visas, which were very, very expensive, especially Turkmenistan, and probably the hotels that we said we weren't going to stay in, but then we realised we were really tired, so we just stayed in a random hotel.
Yeah, I mean, logically, I think we worked out the budget, like if you was going to be clever with it and take your time, between 2 of us on the 125s, it could be like £50 a day, and that's for food, fuel, accommodation, and anything else that comes along with it.
Basically, we just drove off the road and looked for a flat area to put our tent. None of these countries care if you're living in a campsite or just on the side of the road. Through Europe on the way there, we stayed in quite a few just lay-bys, because why not? Yeah, anything else?
No, that was pretty much it. You drive along and you go, well, that looks nice. there's a bit of wind protection, that'll do.
Yeah.
Drive off-road, set the tent up, and then you're away.
Other people use things like maps.me to find hotels and like actually plan things, but we're not very good at that planning.
We didn't plan any accommodation in advance whatsoever. It was all on the fly because we didn't really know how many miles we'd do per day. So it's a case of, we'll deal with that when we get there. Having a tent was very useful in that sense. You didn't have to worry about trying to get to a town or something like that.
So the things that for me were very memorable, because I've not been riding a bike very long, I wanted to feel like I was on a proper bike adventure. So there was two bits. There was one on the Pamir Highway where one of the areas had been completely washed out by a landslide, so you couldn't go on the normal route. And you had to bypass to a tiny little village, which was like 4 houses, go across a river, and then up like this donkey track that like basically went completely vertically up a mountain like this. There's a lot of cars I don't think would get up, but we managed to get up on the bikes, and that made me feel like a proper adventurer. And in Mongolia, we were on the way to a hot springs, and there was a river. Well, there was 3 rivers actually, but one of them was deep enough, like it was up to my knees. And we got through on the bikes, and I felt like a proper hardcore person, like, you know, Ewan and Charlie crossing rivers and stuff, and that was amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, I think for me, most memorable was a lot of the time is when you met random people. I think one of the really good ones for us when we met the guy who Metin in Turkey. I think we'd left Cappadocia, was heading into the mountains. We just pulled over on the side of the road up in the mountains to have something to eat. Just met a guy called Metin. He didn't speak English. We just about speak English, definitely not Turkish, but we just sat there and spoke to him like with hand signals and pictures for like over an hour, and it was just really beautiful. And at the end of it, it was like he just gave us like some random tea that he'd been picking for half the day and that, and he was telling us about his family and things, and just meeting all of those random people as well. For instance, like Kyrgyzstan was a wonderful memory as well. It was at the end of the Pamir Highway, and it was right on top of the mountains. And the weather had been quite bad the past few days, and that particular day it was getting to be, the clouds were coming over and it's generally really freezing cold. We'd stopped off in like a little gur, which is like a little cafe at the top of the mountain, and it's like run by this like grandma with her family and everything like that. And we just popped in for a cup of tea, but we ended up staying like there, eating and everything, and started absolutely chucking down with rain. It got dark, it got cold, and she basically said, no, you can stay here with us. And just small, tiny little acts of kindness like that from just random strangers that we met on the road were just absolutely breathtaking and just wonderful. That's probably quite simple, that one, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'd imagine so.
Yeah, it's in Ulaanbaatar. So we got to the finish line. It was great. We was going to take the bikes back on the Trans-Siberian Express, but by the time we was away, they managed to change their policy and no longer took bikes on the train, unfortunately. So then we had only 10 days to get from Ulaanbaatar all the way back into Europe again for our visas run out. One of the other teams, actually Hopping We Make It, had left their little van. So what we did is we took the van, stripped it out, dismantled the bikes, put them in and all of our stuff, and then we was just going to head off because you can cover a lot more miles in a tiny van, chopping and changing, which is what a lot of the teams did on the way. We stayed with a couple of the organisers overnight, parked the van up, came back down in the morning. Someone had broken into the van and stolen a bunch of our stuff. With as such, it was all of our camera stuff, all of our videos, and all of our footage was just gone. That was probably the most heartbreaking part of the whole trip. Is just knowing that all of those memories and everything was just taken away from us. So we left Altair and then driven probably about 20 miles out of Altair. I don't know, I can't remember what it was. One of the towns, pulled up on the side of the road and camped there. In the morning, we were just packing everything away. White car drives up to us, 3 guys get out. It's nothing out of the ordinary in that part of the world. When they see Westerners, people like to go and say hi. 3 guys get out the car. We're saying hello, how you doing, and all the rest of it. Holly's carried on packing things up. We're still trying to pack up at the same time. And it got to the point of where they just kept asking for things. Like they wanted vodka, cigarettes, and money and stuff. And we're being polite and we're going, look, we don't have any of that. We're not going to give anything to you. 2 of them were just loitering, but one guy started getting quite sort of physical, was trying to push me away from my own bike and was like trying to threaten to punch me and that, which actually, I'm quite a calm person, but you know, that kind of pissed me off a bit. Holly was quite smart at the time because she was carrying on packing everything away as quick as possible, but I was just trying to keep them away from her. And I basically said to him, if you try and hit me, you're going to end up on the floor. At that point, he realised he wasn't getting anywhere with me, went around me and then tried to start on Harley.
I had a hammer though.
Yeah. She was quite clever. She had the hammer in her, and then I got in the way. I went, "You get in the car and drive off." At which point, one of his friends sort of dragged him away into the car. We carried on packing everything away pretty quickly. Car drove off, and then it started turning around again. At which we were like, "We're just gonna go," and just not even bothering engaging with that, and then just drove down the road. So that was interesting.
All turned out okay in the end.
Yeah, it always does.
I think it's great. So, I know, when you're going through countries, you kind of want to feel like you're actually there. If you had like a faster bike or like a more powerful one, you wouldn't get to see as much because you're just going so quickly. You don't get to enjoy the area so much, or maybe you feel less inclined to stop because you're covering miles so quickly. Doing it on 125 meant that you always felt like you were actually where you are, like you were in the moment, which was absolutely wonderful. Also, like, I'm not a very experienced rider, or I wasn't, I am now, I guess. Like, having such a little tiny light bike where my feet can touch the ground, I felt super happy all the time. Even when we were going up mountains, like going down mountains on Death Road, didn't die, which is good. When Paul had his accident, I managed to flip the bike off his head, which I would not have been able to do with a big bike. So yeah, just having that light maneuverable machine makes you feel happy and confident. You know you can pick it up, and you always know where you are and you can enjoy it.
A lot of the time we just sort of worked it out for ourselves, but if we did need something, it's just find the locals. A lot of the people outside of cities especially are just quite friendly, and even though communication is an issue, there's nothing you can't work out with hand signals and the joy of Google Translate in this day and age. It's a wonderful thing and it does work. Even like locals have phones with like the internet and that, so it's quite easy to get communicating going. So if you have broken down, which we did on the way back in the van, not on the bikes, you know, using Google Translate or just pointing to things, it's actually quite simple to work out, you know, what needs to be done. And yeah, people are generally quite friendly in those parts of the world to actually want to help you.
And in Uzbekistan, there was one guy who was amazing. So a guy called Shan, he's 18, is he?
He's about 18, yeah.
So since he was 14, he's been helping out Mongol Rally teams every year out of the goodness of his heart, just showing them around the town where he lives, helping them get their vehicles fixed. He helped us get our tyres changed over to the off-road ones. He wants to be an ambassador, so he thinks of this as like training. And then he hopes to come to London at some point, and he was the most helpful person ever. Like, he was so brilliant. I don't think we'd have found the tyre places without him, would we?
That would have been interesting.
Yeah, he was great. Ooh.
We've actually said we've got two, haven't we?
Yeah, I think Tajikistan for me, which was most of the Pamir Highway. So there was the off-roady bits, there was the on-roady bits, but all of it was beautiful. It was all mountains, very remote. There was lots of rivers, and just the scenery was amazing. I'm not really a city person, so yeah, just being out in the countryside and having all the nice views and the interesting roads, that was definitely the best for me.
Yeah, I'd echo that with Tajikistan as well. It's like the Pamir was probably like the main highlight of this trip. I think it took us like nearly a week to do the entire Pamir Highway through the various countries, and it just kept getting better and better. Every time you thought you'd seen the best, you'd go through a little valley or over a mountain pass, and then there'd just be this completely different scene, and you was like, didn't expect that. And it would just keep doing that every few hours, every couple of days. The people were amazing. Kids was like run out and try and like high five you and stuff and give you fruit. It was brilliant. But the other country, which was completely unexpected as well, which we definitely need to go back to, was actually Turkey. Completely just had no expectations of it. Our plan of Turkey was go to Istanbul, see Istanbul because it's the centre of the earth where east meets west, and then head along the coast all the way to the next country, which was Georgia. Along the way, our plans changed. We headed down to Cappadocia, which was the ancient town where you've got the fairy chimneys made out of rock, and people literally live within these. Also, that's where you have the balloons rising in the morning, so you have to get up really early, at like 4 a.m, just before the sun, and people go up in these balloons, just so you can see as the sun's coming up, all of the light hitting the valley and all of these beautiful fairy chimneys, and we got to experience that as well. But carrying on going from Cappadocia to like the Death Road and that, you just go through all of these little mountain passes, and it was very similar to Pamir Highway, just really secluded, beautiful roads that are just wonderful for riding on. I mean, you don't have to be an experienced rider because a lot of the Turkish ones were tarmacked up until you got to the death road. So even an inexperienced rider would have a wonderful time just having around, looking at all of the scenery that's there and just really feeling like they're in the middle of nowhere and just having a great time.
Why do they call it death road?
Because it's meant to be the most dangerous road in the world. So it's like this little windy...
Anyway, at least, I think.
The internet says it's the most dangerous road in the world. It's this little mountain pass, it's not paved, it's quite narrow, and I guess if you were a car coming next to a truck or something, it would be pretty terrifying. So yeah, it's just really, really high road with like massive drops and hairpin bends. So yeah, if you go over the edge, you are probably going to die, but driving through Istanbul is definitely more dangerous. There's no way that that is the most dangerous road in the world. It's not even the most dangerous road on the trip we went on. But yeah, I guess we did go in summer. It might be worse if it was mudslidey in winter.
While we are on the dangerous road topic, what was the most dangerous road?
I still think Istanbul. Maybe Kazakhstan.
Yeah, well, in terms of people, Istanbul, because they have no care. It's just, there's the space, I'm going. Cab drivers are nuts as well. But probably, I don't know, it's either Kazakhstan or I would actually say the road from Ulaanbaatar to Darkhan.
Oh, that was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the road in Mongolia, it's developing very, very fast. They do have tarmac roads, which was a very big surprise, actually. So all their main roads are actually pretty good tarmac, but they're still building a lot of them. So there's this one stretch of road when we were going north towards Russia, and there was no road there at all, but it was worse than that because it was one of the main routes, so everyone went that way. So it was like, there was one area where it was literally like foot-deep mud, and there was like trucks coming one way, pushing you into the even deeper mud. People driving wherever they want because there's no lines, because there's no road, and there's potholes everywhere, so you just drive wherever there's space rather than on a particular side of the road. Didn't help that it was dark and it was raining and both of my lights had blown, so I was just following you as closely as I could, and that was pretty interesting. Turkmenistan. Take food to the border, you will be there a long time.
Generally, the best thing to do is to go with a damn sight lot of patience, because when you go through things like borders, as Holly mentioned, going into countries that you don't understand, just taking your time to observe it all and just take it one step at a time. A lot of these parts of the world don't operate the same way that the Western world does. You know, everything's organised, but everything's quick. Here, over there, things happen in their own times. There is no, you'll be leaving on this time and you'll be out there on this time. No, the boat to Turkmenistan was supposed to leave at 10 o'clock at night. We didn't leave till 6 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, you have to have a lot of patience with all of these countries, and that's probably the best way to go as well. Try not to set yourself time limits. So one thing that we found was the rally was time constricting, which is why we didn't get to see as much as we had hoped to do, because we was doing a lot of miles. It's not a bad thing. It means we've now been given a nice little taster of all of these countries that we want to go back to. But yeah, give yourself the time that you need to travel through is probably the best thing I would say. And then just, yeah, sit, observe and absorb it all that's going on around you.
Also, if something says cafe on the front of it and it has a menu, it does not mean it's a cafe. It could be someone's house. So be careful when you walk in, because you just get a family that's really confused.
In a word,
Definitely.
yes. We haven't been back long, literally it's been less than 2 weeks, but we've discovered something called the Trans-Euro Trail, which is a community-led trail which is 51,000 kilometres going across the various different countries within Europe, of which it's like 90% of it is off-road. So we're looking into that and to how we would possibly do that in the future, whether we do it sectioned or whether we try to do it as a whole.
And would you do those in 125s?
Oh yeah, no, it's going to be back on the.
Take the terrain.
It'll be back on the terrains again.
Unless you want to give us a new version. Then we'll do it on that one.
Yeah, but it's generally recommended you don't take big bikes on it because it's very muddy, very off-roady, very dirt-based. So they say, yeah, smaller, lighter, and as we know from just using the terrains, it's with that description in mind, it's perfect for them. They'll eat it up without a problem. Change the tyres, jobs are good, and it will definitely get through.
Let me see. Well, we dropped them a lot of times. I dropped mine 13 times. You dropped yours 12.
Yeah.
One of those was his accident, which he'll tell you about soon, I'm sure. So yeah, every time we dropped them, whether it was on like the really, really steep road, so it was literally like rolling over onto its side like really badly, every time we picked them up, they started first time. I don't think there was any time where it didn't start. We managed to go through rivers that were like up to our knees, and they just made it through absolutely fine. Revving the engines like ridiculously badly to get up really gravelly, steep roads, literally, like some of them were like that. Even though we had to sometimes walk a little bit just to set off, and we were revving them probably into the red in first gear, they still made it and kept going. Really, really good, actually.
Yeah, I mean, we did the second highest road in the world, which was up the Pamir Highway, which was like 4,600 and something meters. And we was aware that 2 other bikers on the rally as well, they had trouble. Their bikes didn't quite make it. They had to literally push them to the summit of the road, whereas the terrains, they lost a bit of power, but fully loaded, with us on, they just kept going, which was just amazing. And as Holly said, the bikes went down a lot of times. I had a really crappy accident in Turkmenistan, completely my fault, but it happened anyway. So we're heading towards the gates of hell on the road at about 50 miles an hour, quite tired because of our 12-hour border crossing the day before. I've lost a bit of concentration and I've ended up off the side of the road. Their side of the road is basically sand. So I'm doing 50 miles an hour in sand, wondering what the hell I'm doing there, trying to slow down. The bike's either hitting some deep sand or a rock. Me and the bike have gone down, slid along, the bike's literally flipped all the way over and landed straight on my head. It's pulled my helmet up, which actually tore my ear there and was holding on by about 2 millimeters of skin, something like that, which was great fun. And I'm literally spread eagle on the floor like that, bike on my head. Holly stops and literally throws the bike off my head, which was quite nice. But essentially, even after an accident like that, the only thing that had happened to the terrain was the dashboard had popped out. And it had disconnected in the cable in the back, and a couple of the plastic lugs had broken. That was it, you know, and the crash bars had bent slightly. Once the bike had got up, a nice guy came along actually, didn't he, on the bike, and he helped us get the bike up as well. And then, yeah, the bike started, and then we literally carried on. Once my ear had been cleaned up and bandaged all back around my head together, we literally carried on going for like another 4 hours, didn't we? Till like midnight that night, trying to get to the gates of hell. And the bike just kept going. So it can take a battering. The domino effect on the Pamir Highway was quite fun. When we went off on the donkey track, yeah, that was my fault. I'm spotting the trend here. Yeah. So we're going up this really crap donkey track, which Holly mentioned before, because the landslide had gone on Pamir, and it almost is like 40 odd degrees, just like that, going up in like gravel and mud. Holly was in front, she'd gone up, she'd got stuck at some point, and I thought I'd go up beside her and like try and push her along. I'd gone beside her, she's done that, her bike's come onto mine, I've done that, we've got off the bikes and they've both just gone bov, 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 like 6 feet, just flipping over each other. And all that really happened there was they bent the crash bars again, they're really nice, you just bend them back out again, and I broke my mirror, my left mirror, and that was it. Even from that, which is just pretty amazing, because I know of some other bikes that would probably have crumbled a little bit more than that. So yeah, they're definitely built to take a battering and very easy to maintain. Throughout the whole trip, while we was going through Europe, we didn't actually do that much maintenance to it. It was only when we got to the more rougher roads from like Turkmenistan onwards that we'd sort of every night or so we'd actually check, adjust the chain, lubricate it, and just make sure that the bolts are all tight. Because when you got to like places like Kazakhstan, you got like really horrible washboard where you can only go at like 15 miles an hour because you're basically just doing that for 50 kilometers just to get to a sand dune, which was quite nice by the way, and then back again. So you just want to make sure nothing's fallen out. One thing did fall out, wasn't it, when we was in the Pamir? The chain.
Oh yeah, the chain tensioner.
So the right side chain tensioner, we hadn't checked the bikes for a couple of days, and the right side chain tensioner had basically wobbled itself loose. So we was running on one tensioner, which is quite interesting. But it was fine because when we got to one of the towns, I can't remember where it was, in Tajikistan, just like a mechanic guy just put a piece of metal with some bolts on it, which basically served as the same purpose, and they're still on the bike now. But that was essentially our fault for just not paying attention to it. Yeah. But yeah, they're very easy to maintain. They have very little electronics, so you don't need a laptop to fix them. And they're just really, really easy to work on, being air-cooled as well.
Yours still has the original sprocket, actually.
Mine is still running the original sprocket from the entire trip, and it's still going. It's probably still got another couple thousand miles in it, so that's over 10,000 miles, and it's still got the original sprocket.
Yeah, I only had to change mine because I use it all the time, so I did about 2,000 miles before we set off. So yeah, mine had to be changed.
Yeah. So we actually changed both chains, the tyres we switched out for off-road ones, your sprocket as well, and all of the maintenance and everything we did was just with basic tools. You did nothing special. Most of it was just like a nice adjustable wrench most of the time, and then just like some other smaller bits as well. So all of our tools came into a little pack, was probably about that. That's what it is. It was like one side of a pannier would have just been all of our tools, and that was enough to keep the bikes going all the way through.
And the little toolkit you get with the Terrain, that was actually quite useful. So yeah, that's a really good thing that comes with it. A lot of people said they've had a Terrain and they didn't know it had that because they never bothered to take the seat off. So if you have one, take the seat off. There's a little toolkit underneath and it's great. Look after them. Check the bolts are tight every day if you're going off-road. Make sure that you oil the chain properly. Yeah, that's about it really. Change the oil. We didn't change ours very often, but it's still going. But I guess changing the oil would maybe made it run better.
Yeah, I think the engine was pretty much bomb-proof, which was really impressive as well, despite the fact that, you know, we didn't change the oil for very long periods of time. It still kept going, but don't change the oil. But like with any bike, just maintain it. It doesn't matter whether it's a Sinnis Terrain or whether it's a BMW GS. If you look after your bike, it will look after you. If you don't look after it, guess what? It's going to break. You know, we managed to maintain these bikes very basically by doing about 15 minutes of checks and just like little tweaks of adjusting things every day. It doesn't take that much and it will just keep going and keep going. So, you know, lubricate your chains, make sure your tyres are inflated, make sure your sprockets aren't worn down, make sure all your bolts are nice and tight. Other than that, the bike will look after itself. And
if you're in Mongolia, make sure you use the Russian fuel, not the Chinese fuel, because the Chinese fuel is not good. It's like, it's fine when you're going quickly, but then when you're riding in the city, it doesn't matter what bike or car you have, it just makes it stall every 2 feet. It's really annoying.
Yeah,
don't know why.
It's not very good. Do it. Yeah, don't stop and think about it. Don't ponder it. Go and do it. You won't regret it. Yes, crappy things will happen, but you'll get through them. Everything works out for a reason, and you'll just have the best time ever. Doesn't matter what you're doing.
And you don't have to be an experienced rider. I was not an experienced rider. You can just go and do it one day at a time. Yeah. You don't have to go quickly.
Doesn't matter if you're going to Mongolia or to Wales. Just have an adventure and enjoy it. And it doesn't matter what bike you're on as well. It could be the biggest bike to the smallest one. It's how you use it is what counts.